Got this little fancy 30-second count. Welcome to another edition of Rockin' Recovery. I'm your host, Jay, and today I've got a special guest, also a podcaster, fellow podcaster, Barb Nangle. How are you doing, Miss Barb?
I'm good. How are you, Jay?
I'm doing well. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule and coming on my podcast.
My pleasure. Carrying the message of recovery to those who still suffer is the mission of my life.
That is awesome because that is also my mission, just bringing awareness and hope to everybody, those that are suffering. That's all we're trying to do is bring a little bit of hope. And for me, the acronym of HOPE is Hold On, Pain Ends. And that's mental health, that's addiction, that's all forms, really, because I think everybody's suffering from something.
Yeah. So I just heard two new other options for hope, hold on, pain ends. One was, hey, other possibilities exist. I can't remember the third one, but I just heard two new ones. And I'm like, I love the slogans and acronyms and all that.
Yeah. And I think that's great. I mean, anything that we can do to just spread awareness and just, because eventually all of our stories are going to be somebody else's survival guide.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So if you want to introduce yourself and just jump right in and tell your story. And,
Okay. So since this is all about recovery and not every podcast I'm going to start at the beginning. And that is, I have been numbing since I was a baby. I sucked my thumb until I was 10. I tried to stop when I was 8. Like I consciously stopped, but I would wake up until I was 10. Sucking my thumb. I didn't know until recovery that was numbing behavior. I started smoking.
Honestly, I just learned that.
Yeah. So I started smoking cigarettes in 8th grade at 13, weed first day of freshman year in high school, started drinking at 16. And then I think the switch flipped for me to go from a regular eater to a compulsive overeater in my early 20s. And, what I've said to people is from the time I was 14 until I was 24, I was either high, trying to get high, or sleeping. And I didn't stop at 24. It's just that I started taking courses at a community college. So I wasn't getting high like when I wanted to study and go to class, though I did often get high. And I'm talking weed specifically, but I drank really like abusively until I was in my early 40s. And I even had jobs where I would like leave work and get high and come back. And it was normal to me. Like I just like people, I always called it partying. And now I know like a party has nothing to do with substance use. It has to do with like having fun and connecting with other humans and stuff. I remember when I was in my early 30s, I had met this guy and I went on one date with him and he told me that he didn't drink. And I was like, oh, you're an alcoholic? And he was like, no. And I couldn't wrap my mind around why an adult man who didn't have a problem with alcohol wouldn't drink. And now I can look back and go, oh, he was too healthy for me. That's why I couldn't date this guy. Because the idea, like if he was an alcoholic and he was not drinking, yeah, okay, I can handle that. I can date you. But like you just don't drink because you just don't drink was just beyond my understanding and capability of comprehending. And so I basically stopped drinking. I didn't quit. I just kind of stopped in my early 40s. And I stopped entirely for a year. And then after that, my drinking was never the same because I drank to get drunk. That was the point. I didn't understand people that had one of something. Why are you doing that? Why bother? And then I continued to drink just sporadically after that. I continued to smoke weed for a very long time. By then I was like well into the food. In my early 30s, well, in my 20s, I battled with like 35 pounds. In my early 30s, I got up to, I don't even know, like 80 to 100 pounds more, and then battled with that until I was in my early 50s. I'm now down over 100 pounds from my top weight. And I've been at my goal weight coming on 8 years, which is the only time in my life I've literally never weighed the same thing for 8 years in a row because I was a kid and growing. And then the food thing started happening. So like in terms of my addiction, it's people, codependence, that's my main addiction, and food. So I'm not an addict, I'm not an alcoholic, and I only know that because I stopped those without going through a program of recovery. But my recovery story starts 10 years ago in 2015. I was 52 years old and I hit a codependent bottom, which was the most painful experience of my entire life. I'm talking including physical pain, emotional pain. It was just horrendous. And what happened, Jay, is that at my church, I had volunteered to help co-lead this project serving homeless people. And right around that time, this homeless guy named Dan started coming as a parishioner to my church. And he and I became really friendly. And I felt like it was like, God delivering me this homeless person so that I would learn more about homeless people, so that when I was serving them, I was serving homeless people, not the homeless. And he actually was very helpful in that regard. And about maybe 3-ish months into our friendship, we had a really bad snowstorm here in New Haven, Connecticut, and I invited him to stay at my home, which I now know was not normal. And he did. And then he stayed another time and another time. And within a few weeks, he was practically living with me. And I soon felt trapped in my own house. So he was an admitted alcoholic and addict. And on reflection now, I think he may have been like a narcissist or some kind of personality disorder, because this guy fucked with my head in a way that I had never experienced. And the moment of the codependent bottom, I don't know what was going on. But I remember he and I were standing in my basement in front of my washer and dryer, and I literally collapsed on the floor. And I said to him, I think I'm having a flashback. I meant an emotional flashback. I don't know how I knew. I'd never heard of an emotional flashback, but he thought I was having a drug flashback. And he leapt into, like, he's like, get in touch with your senses. What are you hearing? What are you smelling? What are you seeing? And it turns out whatever that intervention was really helpful to me, but I've never done any drugs where I would get a drug flashback. And what was amazing was him leaping into action. He was the laziest mofo I have ever met in my entire life. So to see him jump into action was just shocking to me. And I now know that what was going on there is what's called an abandonment wound. So my main program of recovery now is ACA, Adult Children of Alcoholics and Dysfunctional Families. And the way that I refer to it is ACA is a trauma recovery program where you reparent yourself and you use the 12 steps to recover. I didn't know that I qualified for that. I'll tell you about that in a few minutes. And that I didn't know that I had childhood trauma. I didn't know that I suffered from intergenerational family dysfunction. And I now know that was an abandonment wound. There was something about this guy, Jay, I still to this day don't know, where I felt like I have to rescue him. And if he leaves, like, I'm going to die kind of thing. And it makes no sense, because it's like I was definitely codependent in all kinds of relationships, but the bulk of my codependence was in romantic relationships. So why this relationship with this guy from church was so like intense for me, I have no idea why. Well, I actually do know why, because he was an angel sent to me from heaven to get me to hit a codependent bottom and land in recovery. So I remember around this time, I don't know what happened first. I'm in therapy. I'm talking to my therapist mid-sentence. I'm talking about Dan. I go, oh, do you think I need to go to Al-Anon? And she was like, yes. So whatever I put into Google, the word codependent came up. And I was like, what is this word? Like I've been in therapy for 37 years. I've read a gajillion self-help books. I've done seminars and workbooks and, spiritual groups and support groups, blah, 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 blah. Never heard this word before. So I go back to my therapist and I'm like, what the fuck else don't I know about myself? Like, how is it possible? I've been trying my whole life and I've never heard of this word. And she said, Barb, I think for you, codependence is a unifying concept. It pulls together a whole bunch of things that you knew about yourself. You just didn't know that they were related. And at first, Jay, I thought she was trying to be nice, but I realized over time that it was really true. So I started going to Codependence Anonymous, very quickly felt a sense of relief. I think knowing that I'm not the only one that has this, there's a program of recovery, people recover from it. And I really soon said to somebody who may have been Dan, I was like, I think I need to be reparented. But I thought I made that term up. I don't know where I came up with that. Well, 6 weeks into my CODA journey, I go to Cape Cod, Massachusetts to visit my dear friends, one of whom had been in AA for 10 years at that point. And she had just raved about how utterly transformed her life was as a result of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I was like, you're going to love this. I'm going to Codependence Anonymous. She's like, oh, that's great. Let's see if we can find a CODA meeting here while you're here. Well, she couldn't, and she found an ACA meeting. So I had heard of it as ACOA. I now know that they're the same. And I didn't think I qualified. I thought it was just adult children of alcoholics, but it's actually adult children of alcoholics and dysfunctional families. I qualify for that. So I'm like, I'll go for you because, that's what I'm like. I'm a self-sacrificing person who does everything for other people because her dad's an alcoholic and I don't need this program. And I walk in, and in the opening readings, they say, we reparent ourselves. And I was like, what? And then they read the list of the 14 traits of an adult child, which is affectionately called the laundry list. And I was like, oh my God. And Heidi tells me I sobbed the whole meeting. I don't remember that, but I bought the literature, came home to New Haven, started going to an ACA meeting, continued to go to CODA. Very soon, like weeks later, a women's ACA meeting started. I started going to that. And then I started doing the 12 steps with a small group of women, because at that time there were no sponsors in ACA in my area. And I couldn't believe, I was like, this is it. This is the issue right here. I didn't know I had trauma. And in fact, once I started hearing this stuff about trauma and I was hearing the stories of the people in the room, I knew, like, I objectively did not have it as bad as the other people in the room, but I knew that I had those traits. I just didn't know how I got them. And then I heard that trauma can result from the absence of good things happening to you. And I was like, ding, 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 that happened to me. So like, I grew up in a house. We always had food. I lived in a neighborhood. I didn't get the shit kicked out of me. I didn't get my bones broken. My parents didn't tell me I was a piece of shit. Yet I had these traits. And so the thing that causes these traits is typically abandonment. So some people are actually physically abandoned, like, their parent leaves or they put them up for adoption. But for most of us, it's emotional abandonment. We weren't given like the nurture, affirmation, love, and care that every human deserves. And it causes trauma. So I was working at Yale University at the time. I was a program coordinator for urban education, prevention, and policy research. So I was in the background running programs in like up to 25 schools at the time. And I now know I had like a 19-year codependent relationship with my boss. I didn't know that at the time. And I started to see, as I started, like, for me, one of the biggest interventions for me was learning how to build healthy boundaries. And I now know that's because codependence is my core wound. That's why I ate. That's why I drank. That's why I drugged. That is why I sucked my thumb. That's why I did all the things. And codependence is a result of trauma. I didn't know any of this back then. But I started implementing healthy boundaries, and I saw this ripple effect in my workplace. And I was like, what's happening? Like, nobody else here is in recovery. So what's happening? And it just, like, it was an illustration of how when you change the dynamics of your interactions, things change around you with all the different people. So what happened for me is I really learned boundaries as a byproduct of the 12 steps. And as I started to get a handle on boundaries, like, these boundaries are amazing. So I started reading about them. And as I was reading, it was all just a bunch of words in the books. And so I'm a pretty visual person. So I started drawing these little drawings to like visually depict, like, what does this boundary mean to me? Well, those drawings turned into handouts, which turned into a workbook, which is the backbone of the boundaries coaching program that I have developed. But in any case, a couple years into recovery, I got laid off from Yale University, and I found my way into the world of like entrepreneurship, startups, and innovation in New Haven and at Yale. And I started my podcast, and I started it not thinking it would have anything to do with my business. It was entirely about carrying the message, because here I am, someone who had done like decades of work, and that shit just sort of scratched the surface of the iceberg of my life, and recovery melted it. So I'm like, I want this wisdom from recovery to get out there into the world. So my podcast is called Fragmented to Whole, Life Lessons from 12-Step Recovery. I have 330 episodes, some 40 of which are about boundaries. And
Wow.
now it's the number one way that I get clients, but I never saw the connection before. And then I started coaching and eventually realized that I needed a niche, and I became a boundaries coach. And I can talk about that later if you want, but I want to share, I think one way that's the easiest to share about some of the really important changes that happened in my life is to talk about my top 3 tools of recovery. Would that work for you?
Absolutely.
Okay, so my number one tool is and always has been pausing. And that's because I can't use any other tools without pausing. But the thing is, when I learned that pausing was a thing, I was like, excellent idea, no idea how to do it. And so what started happening is I would be like, okay, that thing that happened 3 weeks ago, I could have paused then, noted. Okay. And then another time I'm like, oh, that thing that happened like a week and a half ago, I could have paused, noted. And so I saw the time closing between when I could have paused and when I realized I could have paused. And I started to get excited, like, oh, maybe I'm going to remember to pause before the thing happens. And eventually that happened, but it doesn't mean all of a sudden I could pause all the time. It's like, and to me, what I went through is that is how human behavior change works. You learn something is a thing, you have no idea how to do it. Then sometimes you think about it, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you can do it, sometimes you can't. The more you practice, the better you get. And now I think of it as pausing and breathing. And the reason this is so important is that when we pause, we're essentially giving the signal to our body, I'm safe. So I don't need to freeze. I don't need to, there's no fight, flight, freeze, or fawn necessary here. I'm safe. And when we go into fight or flight mode, the way that our brain works is that the frontal lobe part gets basically shut down because all that energy used for thinking, which is a lot, goes to the body's like, we need to fight or flee. So we need that energy. And that's why we can't think when we're all triggered or when we're angry or something like that. So learning how to pause means I can actually think about things rather than reacting to them. I can say, I need a minute, or I can say, that doesn't work for me, or I can say whatever I need to say. So that's my number one tool of recovery. My second most important tool of recovery is reaching out. And for a codependent person, I think an addict of any kind, but a codependent person to ask for help is just like you need to jump out of an airplane without a parachute kind of thing. So I mean that in 2 ways. So one is reaching out to my higher power and one is to humans. So I'll talk about higher power first. So I grew up agnostic until I was like 37 or so. I read the book Conversations with God by Neil Donald Walsh over a weekend. And by Monday, I had my own conception of God that worked for me. And so 15 years later, when I got in recovery, I identified pretty strongly as a spiritual person. But when I got into recovery and learned all the things I learned about spirituality, I started using God. And what I mean by that, Jay, is I would ask for guidance. I would turn things over. Actually, I didn't turn things over. I shoved things over. I was like, no, God, like seriously, you got to take this. And I would turn my will and my life over to the care of God and, just constantly like use God. And I don't remember what it was, but the first time that I handed something over and it was taken from me, it was taken for like 3 seconds. But I got that sense of relief that I don't have to have an answer for everything, that I don't have to worry about everything, that I don't have to carry the weight of the world on my shoulders. And I was like, oh my God, there's something here. So reaching out to my higher power has changed everything for me. And then learning how to reach out to other human beings has been monumental for me. So I mentioned earlier, I was in a step group with 3 other women, and so 2 of us were in our early 50s and 2 in our early 60s. All 3 of them were in AA for years. I was new to 12-step recovery. And one day, one of the women in our step meeting was like, I was really upset the other day and I was going to call one of you guys, but I talked myself out of it. And we were all like, oh my God, I do the same thing. I think about calling, but then I don't do it and I talk myself out of it. So we made a pact. We were like, we are no longer talking ourselves out of asking for help. And then none of us asked for help. That's how hard it is. You can talk about it. You can promise to your fellows you're going to do it. And then you don't do it. And then of course, eventually we did. But learning how to ask for help, Jay, was very humbling for me because this was my experience. I do not intellectually think I'm smarter or better than anybody.
Right.
But on an emotional level, I felt like I'm somehow like taking a step down when I ask people for help. And
I
I was like,
understand that.
what is this? So what that means is I felt like I'm a rescuer, fixer, savior, codependent, enabler. Like that's my deal. Like I'm the helper. Like people come to me for help. I don't ask for help. So when I looked at that, I was like, oh my God, I, on an emotional level, somehow think I'm better than other people. And it was like, oh, that's shitty. Ooh. And that meant, that I must think that those people coming to me were somehow taking a step down. And so I had to do some work with that. And now, man, I love me some help. I love help. Help is awesome. And I think of help as more like short term and support is like ongoing, and I'm actually able to receive support. Like I have a sponsor and I've had a sponsor for years. I've never had a human whose job it was to like stay in contact with me and help me work my way through the steps and other recovery literature and stuff. It's amazing. What a model. I'm actually in the first and only healthy romantic relationship of my life. I happen to date men, and we met when I was 55 and he was 60. So we've been together for a little over 7 years, and he doesn't work and I do. And he's very handy. So he does stuff for me around my condo all the time. And so all my other relationships, it was like they give this much and I give that much. And now this relationship, it's probably, a little bit more like this. And I'm able to accept his support, like not just around the house. He does other things for me too, but like he doesn't work and I do, and he loves to do this stuff. I would not have been able to tolerate that previous to this. And I think, I mentioned this is the first and only healthy relationship. I think like learning how to build healthy boundaries has everything to do with it, because I think the most important thing I do now, and him too, that we never did in other relationships, is as soon as something bothers us, we tell the other person.
You talk about it.
We talk about it. We like, and we're gentle. We don't, bite their heads off. We say like, I have an upset. I have a concern. This is really bothering me. I need to ask you about something, kind of thing. And this just popped in my head. And I find that when something pops in my head, when I'm sharing, that it's a good idea to share it. So the first dilemma that he and I ever had in our relationship was just a few weeks into it. So we still do yoga together, but we would go twice a week to yoga, and we would meet in the car for half an hour before, and we called it car talk. So this one day, I'm waiting in the car for him, and he pulls in on his motorcycle with his ex-girlfriend on the back. And he had already told me, this is what he said to me was, she's my favorite lesbian ex-girlfriend. I'm like, wait, you have more than one lesbian ex-girlfriend? And he was like, no, but she's a lesbian, but we dated, but we never like did the deed and stuff. And I was like, I don't even understand what that means. And I liked her and she was wonderful, but they came in on the motorcycle and they were laughing and having a really good time. And I was jealous. And let me tell you something, Jay, I've never been jealous in my life. I now know that they were showing this level of intimacy with each other that he and I hadn't reached yet. And that's what I was jealous about. So when I spoke to him about it, this is what I said. Well, first of all, he got in the car and I went, ouch, that was painful. And he was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. So we went into yoga. And that night I said to him, listen, I'm going to tell you about something, and this has everything to do with me and nothing to do with you. Nobody did anything wrong and nothing has to change. But I'm telling you this because this is something that's going on internal for me. And if I don't tell you, I will feel like I am keeping it from you. And keeping things from my partners is what I've done my entire life. And that clearly didn't work. And I said, when you drove up with her on the vehicle, like it just really rocked me. And I know that this is my issue and not yours. So you don't have to stop being friends with her. You don't have to stop seeing her. Maybe don't give her a ride when I'm there, kind of thing. And then a few months later, when he and I had developed a real intimacy, I came to understand that that's what it was. And I went back to him and I said, I now know what was going on that time with the bike, is that I saw this level of intimacy between the two of you that I didn't have yet. And now Like they could go away for a weekend together and it wouldn't bother me because I know they're never going to have what
Well,
me and me
that
have.
trust built up too,
Right,
you got
right.
that. Yeah.
Like I didn't know I don't even know how I knew to say that, Jay, because this was my first relationship in recovery. But I think the reason that I know what to say now is because I tell the truth now. I just name
Yes.
it. Like, ouch, that was painful. Right? I lied my whole life. And I thought I was honest. When I got in recovery, I truly believed I was an honest person. I lied about cigarettes, I lied about drugs, I lied about alcohol, I lied about relationships. But the vast majority of my lying was the people pleasing stuff. Like, oh yeah,
Right.
that's totally fine with me. I'm happy to do that. Oh, I'm fine when I'm
Yeah, go
dying.
ahead, walk all over me.
Right.
I'll
Yeah,
be the
exactly.
doormat.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll take care of it. Oh, I can afford this, stuff like
Right.
that. So, like I know I'm like getting off track with the tools and stuff, but like I wanted to talk about him because I am able to receive support from him. I'm able to ask for help from him, from my fellows in recovery, from other friends. I think the area in which I still have the most difficulty for asking for help is in emotional support because I do tell people I'm having a hard time with this, but I'm like, what are they gonna do? Like I don't know, And I actually, as I say that, I remember thinking when I was crying and I wanted to call somebody, I was like, what are they going to do? And now I know here's what they're going to do. They're going to witness you, even if it's over the phone. Being alone and crying is like me being 5 years old and crying in my bedroom without my parents to like soothe and affirm me that like I'm not a bad person. I'm not going to be left alone for the rest of my life, which is what it felt like. And so just being connected to another person, we're protected when we're connected. But I used to think, what are they going to do for me? They're going to witness you and they're going to care for you. And maybe they're going to, pray for you and soothe you. Maybe they'll just sit and listen. But like
They're
that
gonna
is
notice
so
you.
valuable. So
That
learning how to reach out has been super, super important. And then my third most important tool, and this really has everything to do with being a codependent, is learning to keep the focus on myself. So as a codependent, I've been focused on what does he need? What does she need? What do they need? What does the situation need? What does the organization need? What does the cause need?
now
Never
it's what do I
thinking.
need?
Right, exactly. So I have come up with 5 ways that I've learned to keep the focus on myself. So number one is asking, what do I need? What do I want or need in this situation? That wasn't even on my radar. And I'll tell you, when you start asking yourself, if you've never done it, what do I need? You're not going to know. And that's okay. You still keep asking. And then once you start to see, well, what I really want is some rest or whatever it is, you might not give it to yourself because you never have before. But that's okay. You keep asking and then eventually you will. So, what do I want or need? Second one, what's my part? That is of all the gifts in recovery, probably the greatest gift is understanding my part in things. So I realized I was essentially lobbing bombs into my own life, but blaming other people for them. And just thinking that this is, like I had no clue how much stuff I was doing to create chaos and drama in my life and then exacerbating the chaos and drama around me until I got in recovery. So, what's my part? Like, what could I do differently in the future? So, if you are seeing the same dynamic in your life in multiple areas of your life, you're the common denominator. And that's actually good news because if you are the problem, then you get to be the solution. If other
Mhm.
people are really the problem, you're screwed. So, and I also want to say that I heard this phrase in like my first 6 months on a podcast, and it was this is info, not ammo. So if I see I'm the problem, it's information for me to learn, integrate, and grow from. It's not ammunition to beat myself up. So I want to go from beating the crap out of myself to having self compassion. And the
Right.
bridge to get there is curiosity. So when I say it's info, not ammo, I'm being curious. What is the information I can take in here? And I love curiosity because it's neutral. So if you want to go from beating the crap out of yourself to self compassion, info, not ammo.
Asking the
And
questions.
right, right. Like, what could I do differently here? Sometimes it's like, why am I doing this? But other times, then you might just end up beating yourself up. And I always thought of myself as a positive, optimistic person, and I am, and that I had high self esteem. Maybe I did, but I learned that I had tons of negativity in here. that I beat the crap out of myself. I catastrophized, I ruminated, I blamed, I complained, I gossiped. Like I had no idea how much negativity I was involved in. So like my part in things was a lot. And then the third thing is this my business? So as someone who's like rescuing, fixing, and saving people, I was constantly leaping in and helping people without them asking, sometimes when they didn't even perceive themselves as needing help. I gave unsolicited advice. I was constantly doing a lot of mental labor about trying to fix other people's problems and trying to get them to listen to me and stuff. And so I mind my own business. Another one is, whose feelings are these? So I used to, because I had no boundaries, it was almost like I was permeable and I could feel other people's feelings. So I kind of needed everybody around me to be okay because I was feeling their stuff. And I also, like, I really needed people to be okay around me, but I especially needed them to be okay with me because it was intolerable for me if someone was upset with me or thought I was a bad person or whatever. And so now I realize their feelings are theirs. And if someone is upset, they get to be upset. Upsetting things happen. If I have been accommodating you my entire life and I stop accommodating you, I can see why you would be upset by that because I'm
Yeah,
not
but that's not your problem.
right. Exactly. It's not my problem. And then the last way I've learned to keep the focus on myself is learning to take really good care of myself. I neglected, abandoned, and abused the shit out of myself. You know, not only was I over 100 pounds overweight for most of my adult life, you know, I drank to get drunk for decades. I smoked cigarettes, then I quit, and then I hid smoking cigarettes for 20 years, unless I was out in public drinking and smoking with people who smoked. You know, I smoked bales of weed. I put myself in toxic situations and dysfunctional relationships and all this stuff. And so I didn't really know how to take care of myself. And so I heard this phrase from somebody and I love it. She says, "You don't want to pour from an empty cup, you want to pour from the overflow." Well, the only way you can have overflow is if you
Just fill
fill your
yourself
cup
up.
first.
Yeah.
Right. And so what I do to fill my cup might not be what you do. So for me, a lot of my filling my cup is what I call conscious contact with my higher power. I meditate twice a day, every day, because I have to, because my nervous system basically was fucked from all of that stuff. And so I do a lot of work to regulate my nervous system every single day. So I meditate, I pray many times a day. I journal. I've kept a gratitude journal for 25 years nightly. I say affirmations. I listen to positive things. You know, I go to meetings every single week. I sponsor people. I have a sponsor and all that kind of stuff. So those are ways in which I take care of myself. So I know I've talked for a very long time. So
That's okay.
stop.
You know,
I could keep going, but I'm going to stop.
Because I'm going to ask you now, especially about recognizing symptoms of codependency, because I think
Mhm.
all of us, have that people pleasing and codependency
Mhm.
issue within us,
Mhm.
because
Yeah.
a lot of times you get connected with somebody really fast, or,
Yeah.
or you feel really bad when they feel really bad, because that's also codependency,
Yes.
sharing the
Yep.
same emotions all the
Yep.
time,
Yeah.
and wanting to always fix something, or,
Yeah.
to make the situation better.
Mhm.
And when it really, sometimes you just got to let the person do it. So I'm
Right.
going to ask you some questions like, what's recognizable traits in
Yeah.
codependency for
Yeah.
people that think they might have it? What are some recognizable traits?
Yeah, I mean, so you named a lot of them. I've covered a bunch of them. So like people pleasing. So what people pleasing is, first of all, I didn't know that I had it. I heard the term for the first time in recovery and I was like, I'm not a people pleaser. My friend Joanne's a people pleaser. I am the quintessential people pleaser. So people pleasing is dishonest and manipulative, and here's why. So we're going about whatever we're doing with the goal of pleasing people. So you're trying to manipulate them into being pleased by you. Maybe you do it by being overly helpful. Maybe you take control of things because you want them done your way. That's manipulative. It's also dishonest because you're saying that things are okay with you when they're not. You're saying that you're fine when you're not fine. You're like,
But
if I was
manipulating
like,
yourself as well as the other person.
right. And I was like volunteering for stuff I didn't even want to do. Right. So it's manipulative and dishonest. And if that's you, you are not a bad person. You are a wounded person. And now that you know it's dishonest and manipulative, you get to change that. Right. So being a people pleaser is like very common codependent. If you are more invested in someone else's well-being than your own, it's probably a codependent relationship. Like the classic codependent is someone in a relationship with an addict or an alcoholic, but it doesn't have to be
Absolutely.
that way. But it's you're in a relationship of some kind with an
Because you
adult
think you can fix
who,
them.
right, exactly. And you're more invested in their well-being than they are. And so that's a rescue mission. If you're doing more than 50% of the work, that's a rescue mission.
You know, in
If
prison,
you're,
we used to call that Captain Saba HO, you know.
yeah,
You know, that's what we used to call that
yeah,
when I did time in prison.
right,
So it's
yeah,
always so same principle, you know.
right. Yeah, exactly. Like, I'm going to fix you. And it's like what we're essentially doing. Codependence is about focusing externally so you don't have to focus internally. So you don't have to feel your feelings. And so a huge part of my job as a boundaries coach is teach people keep the focus on yourself. And I tell my clients, do you want to hear my top 5 rules for building healthy boundaries? Keep the focus on
You
yourself.
know,
Keep the focus on yourself. 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 Because
you know,
it's so
and
fucking
having
hard.
those boundaries, you know, is so important in all types of recovery and mental health. Having those boundaries, setting those boundaries, and enforcing those boundaries sometimes is the hardest thing you'll
Yeah.
ever
Well,
do is
yeah.
say no
Yeah. Yeah.
and
And
not be unwavering.
yeah, and the thing is, like yes, saying no is a boundary, and that's what most people talk about. There's way more to it than that. It's way more than no. It's like, what do I want, like, need, and prefer? And then living your life in such a way that you have more things that you like in your life and less things that you don't like. You bring more things into your life that energize you, and you get more things that drain you out of your life. Like, that's what it means. When you have healthy boundaries, you don't just keep bad stuff out. You don't just say no. You say yes to good things. You're like, bring on the help, bring on the compliments, bring on the praise, bring on the support, bring on the joy, bring on the celebration and that sort of stuff. So when we have healthy boundaries, we both keep bad things out and let good things in. And
Absolutely.
people who are codependent, like, run themselves ragged. They somehow think if I, like, bleed myself to death, I'm going to save this person. And it's essentially like, I need to have meaning, and I can only have meaning by what I give to other people. So I had a client one time that said to me, and I loved how she explained it. I'd never thought about this before. She said, if somebody gives me a compliment, I have to give them a compliment, because I grew up in a family where everything was tit for tat. You didn't ever get anything for nothing. So if you give me a compliment, I must give you a compliment back, or I have to do something for you, because I have to
Oh,
earn my way. And I was like, oh my
you
God,
got to
that's
earn
so
your
well
worth
said.
type thing.
Right. Yeah. So it's like, you can't just be a person. You have to be a giver. You have to be a doer, an overdoer, an overgiver, and otherwise you don't have value. And so when you keep the focus on yourself, it doesn't mean become selfish. It means focus internally and answer the questions I asked before, like, what do I want or need, and what's okay, and all that kind of stuff. So some other symptoms of codependence, I talked about earlier, like, you're feeling other people's feelings, you're managing their feelings, you're trying to do whatever you can to get them to be okay. I've coached a lot of women who have adult children that have mental health and or substance use problems, and they are just enabling the shit out of their children because they feel so guilty. And it's like, you actually get to live your life. And, if you're going to squander all of your money on them, they have the potential to earn decades of income. You don't.
Right.
You only have so much life in front of you.
Right.
And maybe they'll find recovery, maybe they won't, but you get
But
to
that's
have a
not
good
the
life.
other person's choice. Yeah.
Right. And I think that's especially hard for moms. And, that's why Al Anon was the second 12-step recovery program ever, because the things we do sort of by nature to help the people in our lives that are addicts and alcoholics backfire. They don't work. We end up being controlling and resentful, and then they get resentful of us for being controlling, and then they use us as an excuse to use, and blah, 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 blah. So that's more like enabling is another codependent behavior. I feel like I think I'm forgetting some more
I'm
of
sure
these,
we
but
are, but
yeah,
I'm pretty sure
yeah,
that we covered most of them.
yeah,
I'm, and I think a lot of times people get that confused with caring for somebody because I'll be
hmm
honest, there's a
hmm
point in my life where, I didn't feel valued unless I did everything for a person,
right,
So to bring my,
yeah,
yeah,
same, yeah,
to,
yeah,
to,
and
to
so
make me have self worth, I had to
hmm
provide,
hmm
make this person extremely happy, get everything
hmm
done. And
hmm
sometimes that feeds into my now too. It's like
hmm
I've got to do these things for this person. I've got to show, I've got
hmm
to prove, I've got to
hmm
do this because
hmm
deep down inside, I may still not be worth it.
Yeah, and I think when we tell ourselves I've got to do something, I think the simple shift that's really helpful is I get to, because when we say get to, it's a choice. When we say got it feels like a compulsion or that's some outside force. Same thing with should. You could. It's not that you should do something. You could. You have options, and I think that idea, like for me, another massive gift of recovery was the gift of choice. And I think for me, the greatest gift of choice is the choice of what to think. Like I have choices is one thought, that I just didn't have because I
Absolutely.
was so mired in victim mentality, before. So, and that honestly was hands down the biggest like mindset shift of my recovery was coming out of victim mentality. And is it okay if I say a little bit about that? Because I think this
Absolutely.
is
Talk
really
about a
huge.
victim mentality.
Yeah, so I was never like the quintessential like woe is me, the world is against me, nobody loves me, I can never win. That was not my flavor, victim mentality. But I could spot a victim a mile away because I was going to rescue that person. And here's how I started to see it. When I did my relationship inventory in recovery, I saw that every man I ever dated, I was like, well, if he would just do that, and if he would have done that, and if he did this, and he did, basically, I was saying, oh, I had nothing to do with the status of any of my relationships. And that's what opened the door for me to see my victim mentality. So, what's interesting, Jay, is as time went on in recovery, I saw, like, I knew that my pattern was I attracted emotionally unavailable men. I think the real pattern was codependence, which includes a lot of emotional unavailability. What I
Was it
came to,
sometimes like being scared to be alone type thing?
no, no, it wasn't scared to be alone. It was, I need to fix somebody to be valuable.
Okay.
I need to help
Right.
somebody to be valuable. So, crap, I lost my train of thought. Oh, so the victim mentality. So, what I came to see was yes, emotionally unavailable men were attracted to me. What I hadn't seen was I was attracted to them. I was blind to that. And here's the other big, huge revelation. The reason I was attracted to them and they were attracted to me was because I was emotionally unavailable, but I didn't know that because I was so like in denial. I was numb and drugged and all that shit, my entire life. So coming to see that in my romantic relationships, that I had this if only thinking, that is a big
If
indicator
only
of,
I did this, or if only they did that,
right,
then
especially
everything would
them.
be okay.
Yeah, right. If only the government didn't do this, if only the education system didn't do this, if only the police didn't do this, if only my employer, if only, your victim mentality, because what
How
you're
many
saying.
times have you heard a woman, the wife say, or the girlfriend say, "If only I had a baby, the dude would stay with me."
Yes. Right. And if only he'd stop drinking, and if only is
Yes.
victim mentality, because what you're basically saying is I have no role and no choices. If you're doing a lot of complaining, probably also victim mentality. If you're doing a lot of blaming, victim mentality. And so for me, this has been, I think I have probably 8 episodes on my podcast about victim mentality. And the reason, Jay, is because every time another layer of it comes off, I do an episode about it because I'm like, oh, this shit is insidious. And I will say, I feel pretty confident in saying every person I've ever coached probably has victim mentality. It comes, it's part
Yeah.
of the whole poor boundaries thing. We have a lot of like, some people call it distorted thinking. Some people call it like negative scripts or whatever we have in our heads. And some of them are not verbal, but like I have to give value to be valuable.
It all
Or,
stems from a not loving yourself, not being in love with yourself,
right.
you know,
Yes.
and
Yes.
feeling no value unless you provide or
Mm-hmm.
unless you do this.
Right. Right.
I
And
understand that 100%.
Yeah. And I do want to say this. So, like, I volunteered for something like 13 different nonprofit organizations before I got in recovery. And I thought of myself, like, it literally said volunteeraholic. I now give more hours a week in service to my community than I ever did when I was a volunteeraholic, but I do it by choice rather than by compulsion or obsession.
And by
I do it
purpose, on purpose.
right. I do it strategically rather than at the drop of a hat, and I do it after filling my cup first. So just because you learn how to build healthy boundaries and you stop being a rescuer, fixer, saver, it doesn't mean you stop helping people. And frankly, all of my community service is within 12-step recovery.
And I think once you learn those healthy boundaries, you can help better. You can provide, you do volunteer, like you do volunteer work. You
Yes.
do it better. You're
Yes.
not expecting anything out of it
Right.
and not expecting it to provide, fill some hole inside of
Right.
you.
Or to, yeah, right, to feel like a hero or something. Like, I was on an intergroup in one of my fellowships one time, and I was like, oh my God, there was a bunch of ladies there that had been on there for like 10 or 12 years, and they kept saying, well, I can't step down because nobody will take the position. I'm like, well, vacate it. They can't take a position that's not fucking vacant. They didn't believe in, like, even though it's a principle of 12-step recovery, rotation of service, they thought somehow they were exempt from that. And like, people with healthy boundaries are like, oh, it's a 2-year term, I'm going to do 2 years.
Yeah.
It's a 1-year term, I'm going to do 1 year. I'm not going to be like, I've got to do this. And if the role doesn't get filled, the role doesn't get filled. Don't forget, we have a higher
It's not
power
your
that's
job to
running
fill
these
it.
programs, right? Right. The
Yeah.
group conscience is the higher power, and
Right.
so if the role doesn't get filled or the meeting folds, the fellowship is not going to fold.
Right. It's
Yeah.
not your fault.
Right.
If something goes wrong, it's not your fault. You did your job. All right. That's what you got to do,
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
it is a collective. I mean, in any good group, I'm a part of Celebrate Recovery, and in any good group, it's the whole group is successful or not.
Right.
It's not
Right.
depending on
Exactly.
one person.
Right. Right. And if it is, we're screwed,
Yeah, because
right.
Humans are infallible. They're freaking flawed. We're all flawed.
Right.
And
Exactly.
especially in a recovery meeting, we're all got flaws.
Right.
All of us
Yeah.
trying to fix our own flaws.
Yeah.
And then it's just not going to work.
Yeah. Speaking of that word flawed, I want to tell you another term that I learned in recovery that changed everything for me. And it's the term flawsome. FLAWESOM. So it's like, I'm both flawed and awesome. And here's why it changed everything for me. You know how all addicts, we have black and white thinking, right?
Absolutely.
Well, I grew up with this idea that I wasn't allowed to have flaws. And if I had them, I goddamn well better hide them. That's why I had all these different facades up and all this kind of stuff.
That's what masking is about.
Right. And so when I heard the term flawsome, I'm like, wait, I can be flawed and awesome. Like, me being flawed doesn't mean I'm not awesome. And also, just because I'm awesome doesn't mean I'm not flawed.
Right.
And it's really changed everything for me to this idea. It literally like broke open that black and white thinking for me.
It's kind of like a mosaic. You shatter the glass before you build this beautiful picture.
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah. And speaking of that, because you just said shattered glass, I want to say, I mentioned the name of my podcast, and I want to tell you why I named it that. So it's Fragmented to Whole. And it's because, like, a lot of stuff, I got a lot of clarity on a lot of things from recovery, where I could look back at my life before recovery and go, here's what I was doing, here's what I was thinking, and here's what my motives were. But I was blind to that shit back when it was happening, right? Well, one of those things is I realized I had this notion that it was like I was a bunch of fragmented pieces floating around in space. There was space between those pieces, which meant other people's shit could leak into my territory. And the process of recovery, especially the part about building healthy boundaries, helped me integrate those fragments into one coherent whole. And so it also helped me get rid of the inauthentic pieces. So I can be rocked by things that happen to me, but I can't be shattered by them the way I used to, because I'm whole. So things still happen to me, but I don't, like, it doesn't take me down for 3 years the way that it used to. It might take me a couple of weeks, and I'm not going to go out and like numb myself with drugs and alcohol. I'm going to feel, or food, I'm going to feel the damn feelings, and they're going to pass through me because I didn't know that it was my resistance to the feelings that was 100 times worse than the actual feelings. And so I have been completely clean and sober from all substances for, let's see, when was the last thing I did was weed, which was 2019. So 6 years, right? Because so 6 years ago I was 56 years old. I had like decades of stuff in my system. So now it's out. So I am feeling some really intense feelings from time to time, like I never had. Like I literally lay on the floor and splay my body out because it's the best way I know how to surrender. And sometimes, Jay, I even get dry heaves, but I'm talking 7 to 15 seconds of a feeling. I'm like, wait, okay, that sucked. It did suck, but it doesn't suck anywhere near as bad as the years of pushing that stuff
Years.
down
Yeah.
and the anxiety thinking about, oh, I don't want to look at that because I'm going to feel a feeling, or I don't want to hear about that, or I don't want to talk about that because I don't want to feel a feeling. It's like feelings are energy and emotion. All energy morphs and changes. That is what it does. So it's not going to stay in you forever. And that's what we fear. We think if I start crying, I'm going to cry forever. You might cry for a
Right.
couple of years, but you're not going to cry for 50 years. I'm living
Right.
through.
It might all add up to a lot of years, in the certain circumstances,
Yeah.
but you know what? It's okay in the end. It'll be
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Eventually, as long as you're working on yourself, it's gonna be okay. You'll get
Yes.
there.
Yes.
You'll
Yes.
get there.
Be okay.
You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
everybody's journey is different, and all timelines. There is no timeline. It's an
Yeah.
infinite timeline. If
Yeah.
you're in recovery and working on yourself, there is no timeline.
Yeah. Yeah. There's God's timeline. Yeah. Speaking of crying, I've been a crier my entire life, but I did it alone,
Mm,
very a lot in volumes. And one of the so in the ACA program, we have this document. It's called The Solution. It's right at the beginning of this is the thing that said stuff about we reparent ourselves. And one of the lines in there is, when we release the burden of unexpressed grief, we slowly move out of the past. And what that means specifically in ACA is, when you come here and you do this work, you are looking at what actually happened to you. Like in ACA, we get down to causes and conditions. Like, why am I the way I am? I know, like in AA and NA and OA, you're not allowed to look at other people. In ACA, we recognize you're a product of your environment. We look at the family system, not to blame them, but to understand
the
and
dynamic.
to name the facts, right?
Right.
So we're getting down to causes and conditions. And I have lost my train of thought.
I do that all the time. It's like
I don't.
squirrel.
Yeah. I actually don't usually do that. So yeah, I'm afraid I lost it. Maybe, something.
Unfortunately, I do that quite often.
Yeah.
I got this great thought and I go to speak it and it's not
Right.
there anymore. And I'm like,
Yeah. And I'm flawsome. So it's okay. Like I'm not.
It's okay. Yeah.
Like in years past, I would have died of guilt and shame. Oh, I know. It was
Really?
crying. I was talking about crying.
Yeah.
So I would cry in volumes alone. And then when I got into recovery, I saw the difference between what I might have had if I had grown up in a healthy, functional, loving, nurturing, affirming family, and what I actually got. And so when you grieve, when you know what you're actually grieving, you grieve that, you release the burden of unexpressed grief. I am not a crier anymore, Jay. I feel like I had this gigantic well of tears that when something happened to me in everyday life, I would cry in volumes because I was trying to cry out that giant well of tears and I could never empty it. And then when I got into ACA and I knew what I was crying about, I cried a lot in my first 2 years. I mean, a lot. And I also learned to cry in front of other people. In fact, when I started in ACA, I cried in every meeting for like 6 months, and I was the only person ever crying. And it was like I couldn't not cry. Like all
Right.
that work I had done for all those years to hold it in, I couldn't even do it because it was just like, this was just too huge.
Right.
And now I almost never cry. And most of the time when I do, it's crying because I'm so moved because God is so beautiful, or some loving, incredible thing I get to see, or someone has healing. And, it's just amazing. It's just
Emotions are awesome,
Mhm.
especially, coming out of addiction,
Mhm.
getting your emotions and your feelings back.
Mhm.
It's sometimes overwhelming, but it's
Mhm.
also so rewarding in the end.
Mhm.
I mean, I'm so lucky that I get to feel things again when that's exactly what I didn't want to do. I didn't want to remember nothing. I didn't want to feel nothing. I, so deep in addiction that I didn't care. I didn't want to care,
Yeah. Yeah.
you
I hear
know?
you. Yeah,
And so,
absolutely.
yeah, it's amazing that you so much work on yourself and now you're giving back. That's the most
Hmm.
amazing thing. I think
Yeah.
in any program, in any good program, the giving back aspect is one of the biggest things you can do to help the
Yeah,
next person.
absolutely.
It doesn't
Yeah.
matter if it's just talking about it, bringing awareness about it, just
Hmm.
being there for somebody
Hmm.
is awesome.
Yeah, and just sitting in a chair in a meeting is service because the meeting exists because people show up and sit in the chairs.
And I've got one tonight. Tonight's Thursday, and my Celebrate Recovery meetings Thursdays. And it's just amazing that all these people, and it's a big family. It really is
Yeah.
extended family. I mean, me and a person that I go with, we've gone there so much that we're welcome in people's houses again. I'm like, I'm not
Yeah.
welcome nowhere. I'm an addict. Remember,
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
did a lot of prison time, and
Yeah, yeah.
you want me in your house?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's great.
And I still get nervous and uncomfortable. It's like, oh God, you know, but then it goes away so fast now,
Yeah.
because it really is like family, and I'm
Yeah.
I'm grateful for it.
Yeah, and we're protected when we're connected,
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely.
Yeah.
And you got all the whole good sayings, connections, the opposite of addiction. You
Yes.
know,
Great.
it's
I love
true
that.
though,
Yes,
because
it
we
sure
isolate
is.
so much
Yes.
in addiction that
Yeah.
we connect with the wrong people. So
Mhm.
you can be alone in a crowded room
Mhm.
and don't care about it. It's like, okay, yeah, all right, whatever. You
Yeah.
don't feel anything. You're so isolated, you don't feel nothing anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Barb, one last question. I don't think I asked any questions really, but one last thing. What's one thing that you want somebody to take away from this, if anybody's out there listening, and about anything? What's one
Yeah.
thing about
So it's never too late. I don't care how old you are. No one is beyond healing. Like healing is possible, and no one is beyond hope. So you're not uniquely flawed. You're not terminally unique. You can recover. Things can get better. I don't give a shit how shitty it's been, how long it's been going on. There is hope.
Thank you for your time, Barb. I really appreciate it. And remember, if you're struggling out there, just hold on because the pain will end.
Hmm.
It will. Excuse me.
Hmm.
But it will end. Just keep.
Hmm.
If you're struggling, find somebody to connect with. Get a hold of somebody. Talk to somebody. You know,
Hmm.
I. Suicide hotline. We talk about
Hmm.
a lot of that on here.
Hmm.
988. It's a great thing to
Yes.
get connected real fast.
Yes.
988 in the U.S. and
Hmm.
111 in the UK and Canada.
Hmm.
In case you're struggling.
Yeah.
And with the holidays coming up and everything's rough around the holidays, there's so much trauma and everything else happens.
Hmm.
It's so much more exaggerated
Hmm.
because it's all the stresses and everything else coming down on the holidays.
Hmm.
Don't feel alone. Don't isolate
Yeah.
yourself. Reach
Yeah.
out, talk to a friend, talk to a loved one, talk to family, go to church, go
Hmm.
to a meeting. Yeah, do whatever you can to get outside of yourself
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
find the help that you need.
Yeah, yeah, and also helping someone else, even if it's like bending over and picking up something that someone
Yeah.
dropped, feeling like, oh, I'm useful, I matter,
Yep.
but you don't, again, like we've both said, you don't have to be useful to matter, but
You
sometimes
matter
showing yourself,
already.
yeah, yeah,
You matter. I'm proud of you and you're worth
yeah,
it.
yeah.
Keep rocking recovery. Until next time, I'm Jay. Over there is Barb. We
Thanks,
love you.
Jay.
Take it easy.
All righty.